If you've been around the channel for a while, it'll come as no surprise that I'm a big id Software fan. From Commander Keen to Wolfenstein to Doom to Quake, id Software has become one of my favorite game developers over the years. It should also come as no surprise that I've been looking forward to the recently released Rage 2, the sequel to id Software's Rage that was jointly developed by id and Avalanche, best known for the Just Cause series of open-world games. The original Rage was notorious for the mixed reception it received, with lots of praise for the combat mechanics, and lots of criticism for the open-world experience. As such, I decided to approach Rage 2 with cautious optimism. Since I picked up Rage 2, I wanted to make a video on my personal thoughts on what I've played of the game so far. Keep in mind that this isn't a final review by any means, just a collection of my first impressions and overall feelings toward the game. To give you an idea of my progress before we begin, I'm nearing the end of the story but have spent the vast majority of my time doing side missions and looking for enemy encounters. Let's start things off with the story. After an opening cutscene explaining the events from the first game, and an introductory mission that's half cutscene, half gameplay tutorial, it turns you loose into the open world to pursue whatever missions you desire. To briefly sum up the story, the game takes place on Earth after it has been ravaged by an asteroid striking its surface. To prepare for this event, a group of people known as Archists were hidden away in stasis, inside underground shelters known as Arcs, to be reawakened after the asteroid had struck and the damage had been done. In the years that had passed by, a group known as the Authority rose to power and attempted to take the Earth as their own. A resistance began to rise against the Authority, and the Authority's leader, General Cross, with Arcus joining the Resistance's cause. In Rage 2, you play as Walker, a second-generation Archist and newly promoted Ranger. The Rangers are a group of soldiers fighting against the Authority that use a technology known as nanotrites to enhance their physical abilities. Due to a surprise attack on the Rangers' home base of Vineland by the Authority, Walker becomes the last of the Rangers, leaving the responsibility of taking down General Cross and the Authority on the player. The Wasteland, being a lawless and chaotic place, is littered with various factions of sorts, with most looking out only for themselves and showing incredible hostility to anyone else. The groups you'll be seeing the most of are the Goon Squad, a group of crazed raiders, the Mutants, people heavily corrupted by Authority experiments, the Immortal Shrouded, highly trained bandits taking no small amount of inspiration from ninjas, the Riverhogs, raiders that live in the swamplands, and of course, the Authority. While the story is certainly there, Rage 2 is not a story-centric game. It serves as a backdrop to explain those you're fighting and your purpose, but don't go into the game expecting a deep lore or very compelling story. This is an id Software game after all, and id Software games typically put the story on the back burner, focus mostly on gameplay. This game is no exception. Speaking of gameplay, this is the aspect of the game on which I feel most conflicted. The primary aspects of gameplay revolve around the combat, loot collection, missions, and exploration. The combat is, in my opinion, the part of the gameplay that stands out above all the rest. If you played an id Software shooter, you have a good idea of what to expect here. Fast-paced, brutal gunplay that's just a lot of fun. With the addition of the nanotrite abilities, which are pretty much equivalent to superpowers, the most fun I've had is finding the craziest ways to dispatch enemies. Taking a page from Doom's latest entry in particular, the fast-paced combat is really the heart and soul of the game. It's a polished, well-done experience that is only enhanced by creative weapons such as the Wing Stick, a three-bladed boomerang that can be thrown to chop up enemies in a number of ways. Additionally, weapons like the Grav Dart Launcher, which sticks a number of darts inside an opponent and allows you to choose any object for them to gravitate towards at high speed, spice up the typical FPS gameplay. These won't replace your go-to weapons like the assault rifle or shotgun, but they add some variety to an otherwise standard loadout. And don't let me forget the nanotrite abilities. A deadly shockwave summoned from the palm of your hand, a vicious slam to the ground after soaring through the air, which blows apart enemies unfortunate enough to be standing nearby, throwable energy shield, a vortex that pulls enemies in and blasts them away. This game has some excellent and creative ways to deal with bandits and the Authority alike. Alongside the base weapons and abilities, which you'll find scattered in the open world through arcs that only you can access, you can utilize various currencies and loot to upgrade them. The upgrades themselves are useful and contribute to making you feel as though you're making steady progress and growing stronger as you play, but the management of what feels like a million different currencies to spend on different upgrades, done by navigating through glitchy and crowded menus, only serves to make this more frustrating than it has to be. Some types of loot include typical money, which can be found in storage containers in the world, or through completing objectives. Feltrite, which is dropped by enemies after death, can also be found in storage containers and embedded in the environment, and rare meteorites. And upgrade points specific to things like vehicles, which can be earned through completing objectives for friendly characters you'll meet during the main storyline. You can also find other rarer objects through killing boss enemies or finding rare art chests. Maybe it's just me, but it feels like a lot to manage at times. Feltrite feels like the most common form of loot that I've come across, since it's dropped in very small amounts by defeated enemies. This Feltrite doesn't last very long before disappearing, and all Feltrite heals the player somewhat. This feels similar to an aspect of combat in Doom 2016, in which enemies drop health after being killed normally and in larger amounts after using finishing moves known as glory kills. This does keep the flow of combat going, and lumping Feltrite together both as a healing item and a type of loot isn't necessarily bad, just a little confusing when first starting the game. Loot is a primary motivator for exploring the expansive open world, another aspect of the game that feels a little off. Don't get me wrong, the world is substantial as far as size, and has some unique locations, but at the same time it feels a little empty. You have your enemy strongholds to take back, which always contain loot of some sort, arcs to find, which contain the biggest upgrades and abilities, and trade towns to purchase things and meet with characters important to the story. But that's about it. It feels to me that there's not much else to fill the gap between these areas. You'll occasionally come across some of the factions fighting, which you can interrupt if you so please. There's really nothing else of note outside of the locations marked on the map, or any real reason you would want to stop and look around outside of getting from one place to another. For example, one of my favorite parts of the main series Fallout titles is the fact that there's a ton of environmental storytelling through truly unique locations, meaningfully designed structures or human remains, or notes and terminals. You might also meet a friendly character roaming around, which Rage 2 has a notable lack of. Fallout gives you a reason to veer off the path to the next combat or mission location because you feel like you might see something fascinating at any turn. I just don't feel that way in Rage 2, and that's a little disappointing. Finally, I want to talk about the vehicles. Rage 2 prides itself on having a wide array of vehicles, with almost every vehicle that you come across allowing you to drive or pilot it, as well as registering it to a garage for use at any time. This is a neat feature, and coming from Avalanche, which developed not only the Just Cause titles, but also 2015's Mad Max, I would expect no less. That being said, the actual driving mechanics strike me as a bit too realistic. In true post-apocalyptic Mad Max fashion, most of the vehicles are cobbled together through spare parts which result in huge, threatening masses of metal. They also drive as such, feeling heavy and oftentimes unwieldy. The attention to detail as far as this goes is something I can appreciate, but in a game as crazy and unrealistic as Rage 2, I think they could have spared some of the more irritating aspects of the driving. But hey, you can pilot a huge drone. That's pretty cool in my book. Graphically, the game can at many times be stunning. Just take a look at some of this. The use of neon pinks, yellows, blues, and something of a punk art style give this game a much-needed visual pop, especially when looking back on the dull shades of brown and gray the first Rage consisted of. While it doesn't impress me quite as much as id games running on the id Tech engine did, as opposed to the Apex engine Rage 2 runs on, this is one of the best-looking open-world games I've seen in a while. Likewise, the music is also suitably rock-oriented and goes well with the carnage and chaos that will likely be occurring while you play. Sound design is also pretty great, with weapons and your nanotrite powers sounding, well, powerful. So, my final thoughts on Rage 2 so far. It's a solid game, with some flaws that I feel could be ironed out over time and with additional content. If you're looking for a story-heavy, lore-centric open-world game, you won't find exactly what you're looking for here. But if you're craving that trademark id Software-style combat before the release of Doom Eternal, Rage 2 might be worth a shot. That's all I have for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.